Hey guys, this is MJ with the Rustic Maple Design family. Today we are going to be giving this entry table a facelift with salt paint. So follow me and we will get this thing started, and you can kind of see what it's going to look like because there's going to be a lot of things we're going to be working with. So we're working with Modern Masters front door paints. I'm using two of those colors. Optimistic is one and Serene is the other. We're going to be using Saltwash, which is like a Saltwash powder. I've got the Annie Sloan paints of Old White and the Duck Egg Blue. And then I'm not sure if I'm going to use the Polycrylic or the Dixie Belle Gator Hide yet. So we'll kind of know that more as I'm going along. So basically what we're going to do is this table has a crackle paint on it, which you can kind of see the blue there. And then I've also put some gilding wax, and everything will be down in a link below in the description for you. The gilding wax I put on here because I want to be able to see it in the end. I've also painted some black on this entry table. I painted the black on there to get rid of the blue because we're going to have some of that scraping through when we sand, and you'll understand it more when we get to the project. All right, let's get started. I have my three colors that I'm going to choose, and you can choose any colors you want. I'm adding Saltwash to these three colors. Like I said, I'm using the two Modern Masters. One's the blue, which is Serene. The yellow is the Optimistic, and then I'm using the Duck Egg, and I'm putting them in these plastic bowls. You can use whatever you want. I just happen to have these plastic bowls, and I'm going to throw them away afterwards. So I've already mixed the Duck Egg Blue and the yellow Optimistic. I'm going to work on the Serene right now, and I'm just kind of showing you what to do. So in this particular project, I'm going to be working vertically with a lot of the paint, so I need it to be thick enough not to drip. So I'm going to be using this layering block that you can kind of see here on the corner, and I'll show you how to use that in a minute. This little square block with the little handle on it. And that's going to be applying all these different salt paints. So you can kind of see this is kind of drippy. I don't want it drippy. I want to be able to have that, and I'm just stirring it with an old pencil. You can just use whatever you want. Keep adding the salt wash until you get a thicker consistency. You want it thick enough. Like I said, for my project that I'm doing, a lot of it's vertical. There's some horizontal too, but I want to be able to scrape the paint onto this entry table, and then I don't want it dripping. So it needs to be thick enough. So just keep on mixing until you figure out how thick, and I'll kind of keep working with this. And some of the paint you may need to add more of the salt wash, and then others, even if, so what I found is this blue is taking a lot more of the salt wash than the yellow did. So the yellow color didn't take nearly as much. Why? I have no idea, because they're both made from the Modern Masters, but they're different colors, so maybe that's what it has to do with. So just get your colors ready. I went ahead and mixed all my colors before starting. You do not have to do that. And in a way, it might be better if you mix them one at a time, because if you're going to have this project going on for longer than, like if you can't get the project done in a day, like using the three colors that I'm using, then it'd be better not to mix it until you're ready to use it, because it will start to dry out. So if you aren't able to do that, don't mix it like I'm doing right now. I'm able to have time. I've set my time aside. I'm going to get these three colors done in one day. So I'm just mixing them now, and then all I'm going to do is I'm going to take a damp washcloth rag that I have. I'm going to get it wet, and I'm going to lay it on top of the bowls. Okay, see how I'm starting to get a little thicker there? That's kind of where I want it. And we're going to use this layering block to take care of it. But anyway, put a wet washcloth over those bowls to keep that paint wet if you're going to use it like I'm doing, and mix it ahead of time. So just make it to where it's thick enough. See where it's not really dripping too hard? That's kind of where I want it. The yellow's like that. See how it's not moving? Duck Egg Blue, not moving as much. Because we're going to be just kind of layering that onto the actual entry table, and you'll kind of see what I'm doing as we're working on it. So note too, like I had mentioned before we get started, I did put a gilding wax on this entry table. I did that because when we're done, we're basically putting a bunch of colors, the gilding wax, we've got the black underneath, getting rid of the crackle blue that I already had on the furniture. We got the black underneath, so that those colors are what's going to be protruding out once I sand through. So you're going to see all of that. I want the gilding wax to show through, because I don't want the metal, I want there to be a metal highlight, but I don't want it to be a crazy metal highlight. So you'll understand when I'm done what I'm doing, and if you want to do it that way, you're fine, or the gilding wax you can put on at the very end and have more of a metal look if you want. But you'll understand what I'm talking about as the project goes on. It's kind of hard to explain until you actually see me doing it. So let's just get this mixed up, and then we'll get started on the project. pretty much done. So let's get started. Like I said, I've painted everything black. I painted the wood and everything. I've got black underneath, and that's because when I sand through, I want that black to show more. I want the dark wood. I took off the hardware, just the knobs on top, but I did not take the hardware off on the sides because they're kind of hard to take off. And I'm going to be painting them all anyway. So, okay, we're going to get started. Just kind of scrape. Start scraping the wood, and it's completely random. So you don't want to cover the entire face of whatever you're working on. See how I'm just putting the blue? Remember, I'm working with 3 colors. So it depends on how many colors you're going to use. But you're basically, and when I'm done, you'll kind of understand it again as we're finishing here. But you basically want to have the colors in different spots of the faces of the wood. So like right now, I'm just putting blue randomly. Just kind of randomly, kind of where I want. It doesn't really matter where you're putting it, because what's going to happen is when we're done with all these colors that we're just adding to this piece, we're going to be sanding off. The top coat is going to be the old white Annie Sloan. That's going to be our outer coat. We're actually going to be sanding a lot of that. So, and you'll get down to these beautiful colors underneath. So kind of randomly, just sporadically place them all over and just kind of watch how I'm doing it. Okay, I had a duh moment. I forgot to paint the top part of the cabinet with the black, just like I did the bottom. So I, behind the scenes, did that because duh. So, one thing I want you to know, so this is the hardware. I've got 4 pieces of hardware, and then I've got some upholstery tacks that you'll kind of see at the end. I just wanted to add to the top of it to give it a little bit more depth. You're going to want to put a little bit of each color on these knobs. So again, randomly. I'm just barely touching them, just kind of putting some blue just on parts of them, and I'm just dabbing it on all of them. So do that, and you want to do that with all 3 colors. So see how I kind of have it just randomly? You can kind of see that more close up, but just kind of randomly put them. So that's what I'm doing. And again, you want to do this with all 3 colors, and then we're going to cover it in the old white, and then we're going to sand it off, and we're going to get those colors to show through. It's really pretty. Okay, now I'm going to just work with the top, and it's the same concept as the rest of it. Just be random. So when you're using this layering block, it's kind of fun. You're just sliding it. And it's okay if some of it's thicker in places than others, because afterwards, that's the kind of nice thing about the salt paint, is that it's a texture paint. So this layering that you're doing, your piece isn't going to be what we would consider smooth when you're done, when you do a lot of painting of furniture. This is actually going to have textures on it. So don't worry about it if you have some that's a little thicker than the rest. Of course, you're going to have to sand it down some, but just kind of slide it on there. So see how I'm just kind of sliding it? And again, if you have some places that are thicker than others, that's fine, because in the end, you'll want a little bit of that texture coming through. So just follow the pattern like what I'm doing. Kind of glance back. Go back and look back and see if there's any place that you want to fill in. Okay, now I think that's pretty good. This is the blue. Now we're going to use the duck egg next. Now you can choose what colors you want, and it's going to be the same process. But one thing before I tell you this other part is, as you're adding the next color, watch how I'm doing it. I'm not necessarily putting it over the blue. I'm kind of putting it either beside the blue, or I'm filling in some of the wood spot that doesn't have paint on it yet. So see how I'm not really covering the blue per se. I'm filling in where the wood is. And you kind of want to do that You don't have to fill in all the wood, but you do want to start doing that because as you're going to sand, you want the different colors to shine through. And if you're layering over each color, like say that you're doing the blue and then you could do the duck egg blue over that, you're not going to get to the color that you want. So kind of follow what I'm doing. Watch how I'm putting it randomly. I'm still just scraping, doing the same exact process. And we'll do the exact same process with the yellow. Now this is what I did want to say. The 3 colors I've chosen, you can choose whatever colors you want. You can choose how many, how little, doesn't matter. The thing that you want to keep in mind though is what color do you want to be more pronounced when you're done. And what I mean by that is when we're done and we're sanding with the old white, what color do you want to see the most when you're done with your piece? I personally wanted to have the yellow shine through the most. So I chose to put the yellow as my last color because then it's kind of like a reverse thinking. When you're sanding, the yellow is going to be one of the first colors that you're going to see because it's going to be on the top. So kind of decide that too, and you'll see by my piece what I'm talking about. You can either follow how I'm doing it or do it how you want to do it. There's not really any wrong way to do it. Just kind of decide on that. So again, I didn't want so much of the duck egg. I have it periodically, but I like the blue and the yellow mostly. And that's what I want to see the most of, but I know the yellow I want more pronounced. So you'll kind of see what I mean as we're getting through all this. At the very end, you'll notice. All right, now we're working on the top. Same exact thing. Just kind of slide through that, just like you did with the blue. Okay, now we're working on the yellow. And it's going to be the exact same thing, but do not forget, you do want to be doing your hardware along with this. So make sure that you're doing each color and you're just basically just dabbing the hardware with each of the colors. And it doesn't have to cover the hardware completely because you do want some of the metal, coming through. So just kind of fill it in, and I'll kind of show you a close-up too as we're getting down to the to the end colors. But this is the same thing. So I'm kind of looking around right now. Okay, where are there bald spots basically? Where you can't see, where there's a larger piece of the wood than needs to be there. You do want some of the wood, that's fine. But you're covering most of it with paint. So just kind of see, and then if you need to, I don't know what your piece will look like compared to mine, but kind of step back once you've got some of the colors on there and see if you have enough. Like with the yellow, you just kind of want to step back and say, okay, does it look at a distance like I have enough yellow kind of evenly around everywhere? Like not a whole bunch over on the left and nothing on the right, so to speak. So just make sure that you're evening it out to an extent, but it doesn't have to be exact. But there is still a method to it though. You do want to kind of have it evened out. So just kind of follow what I'm doing. All right, now this is the hardware I'm talking about. I'm just finishing up. This is the very last of it. So get all those colors on there. And then we're gonna leave the hardware alone until we do the old white over it. Okay, now super quick, we're done here. I'm going to show you how to clean this layering block because it's really pretty simple and a lot of people ask this on the comments. So I just use a paint stir stick, and you're just going to scrape it and kind of straight, in a straight, gentle way. Just scrape off the extra paint that's all over it, especially on the edges, and kind of scrape that off as you're running it under the water, and then you can use some soap to clean it off too. Okay, and when you're finally at the very end, just start using a paintbrush with some of the soap. Toothbrush, and then just kind of wipe it off. It just gets more into the nooks and crannies of it, and it washes off pretty well. You won't get it all off, but you'll get most of it off. Okay, now this is when you look at your project and you go, huh, what the crap did I do to my furniture? Just remember, you go through an ugly stage before you see its true beauty. So when you look at this, you kind of go, whoa, I think I made a mistake. But you'll see that we're going to cover this up and it's not going to be so bad. Now, one thing I do want to tell you, in between making this video, I had a knife accident, which one of my fingers on my dominant hand, of course, a knife fell off my magnetic board and it went straight through my finger. So the rest of the video, I am going to show you stuff. I'm not using my dominant hand, and I'm not going to put you through the whole torture of watching me sand, which took me forever to sand this thing. It really throws you off when you don't have your dominant hand. So I'm going to show you, and plus also when I painted this thing, the iCloud storage, the stupid thing said it was full and then it quit recording. So I'm going to show you, I mean, you just paint it anyway, and it's going to be the old white, Annie Sloan old white chalk paint that you're going to use. And you don't make that salt. You just use it as it is. You're going to paint the whole thing just like you would any type of furniture. But I don't have that on video. And then I'm just going to show you how thick you want to make it before we go through the sanding process. So just bear with me the rest of the video. I will show you how to do it, but I'm not going to be as fast. So just know that you'll sand faster than me and your project will be quicker than mine. So that's a good thing, right? So I just wanted to let you know that before we go much further. All right, this is what it looks like painted. I did use the Annie Sloan Old White chalk paint. Now, if you want it to be more textured, you can add some salt to that, and then it will make it more textured. If you do not, which I did not, because I'm going to be sanding most of it off anyway, I just used it as your normal chalk paint. So this is what it looks like, and then we're going to do a close-up video so I can show you a little closer up how thick you want it to make sure that when you do paint it, you want it thick enough, because when we're sanding, you want to be able to leave some of it on there, but you want to get to the colors underneath. And if you don't do it thick enough, you'll kind of sand off all the white and you'll just have all the colors, so it won't look as pretty. So it is good to make sure that you do have it thick enough, but it doesn't have to be like super thick like you would when you're normally painting a piece of furniture. And again, I'm going to show you a video of that so that you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm showing you the piece. I've done part of it and sanded it because I said this is taking me forever having just one hand. See how I have it's sort of see-through? So see how you can kind of see some of the coloring underneath. That's about how thick you want it. Just enough to where you can still see stuff underneath, but it's not super see-through. So see where you can kind of still see some of that? Because again, we're sanding it. And that's about how thick you want it to be. And just paint the entire thing, everywhere. Don't leave any of it unpainted. And this is what you're going to get underneath. So I've already begun sanding it. And you'll see these really pretty colors coming through, and that gilding wax of copper that I used. You'll see that. So if you want to have, so this is in my bedroom and I have the sun shining through. When the sun shines through, that gilding wax really shines. So I like that. So see here, okay, there's the blue, there's the yellow, and then there's the duck egg. And so you're going to see that throughout the whole thing. And then you have the natural wood where I painted it black underneath. So you kind of see where that is. And then if you look really close on parts of this, see how there's yellows? I mean, all of it's just mixed through. It's beautiful. I love it. But you can kind of see too, here's where we're going to start seeing some of the gilding wax. So you'll see some of that copper color. See how that's shining right there? So if you want that and you want it to be more subtle, do it beforehand. If you want it to be more obvious, you can put the gilding wax on afterwards and you'll just see it a lot more. So that's totally up to you. But I'm just showing you what we're going to be working towards. See all these different colors, and see on the hardware, see all these different colors, which I just love. So you've got the natural metal, you've got the yellow, the blues, the two different colors of blues, and the white. And when you're sanding it, you basically, it's up to you how much you want or how little you want. But I wanted enough of it to show the wood underneath. I wanted the colors. So basically when I did it, I just basically sanded it enough to where the colors shone through more thoroughly. You'll start seeing a color, I go a little further. And see how I only sanded some of that doorknob or the handle? The whole thing's not sanded because you want to keep some of the white. So that's the key. So I'm going to show you here again because my left hand, I'm not able to use it. I'm using 220 grit sandpaper. And then I'm using a spray bottle because it is in my bedroom, so I don't want a bunch of dust everywhere. So definitely use, you can use a mask so you're not breathing it. And this is how I do it. I just tear the paper and kind of make it into a usable piece. And I do usually fold it in half. I like to start at the bottom of a piece because, gravity, as you're sanding and stuff, it all falls anyway. So if you start at the bottom, you can kind of get that done and cleared away. And then as you're moving towards the top, the dust will fall on the bottom, but you already have the bottom done. So, and then I also like to go to the more intricate spots first because I like to get the worst spots over with. So that's what I'm doing here. See how I'm kind of getting into the corners. Now your piece won't be exactly like mine, I realize that. But if you have something that has corners, kind of follow what I'm doing. I'm just spraying it a little bit so that it doesn't get dusty everywhere, which you don't have to do that, but again, I'm inside up in my room, and so I just didn't want it everywhere, and that kind of helps. So see how I'm just kind of gently, I'm sanding, and mind you, I know this is painful to watch, but I'm having a hard time with my left hand, and my right hand doesn't work as well as my left. So the sanding is not a real pretty to watch, but I wanted to kind of show you how to do it. So you want to get into the crevice, and that's why I bent the sandpaper. So I bent it to where I can get into that 90 degree. See how I can get in there and see how I'm seeing colors start to shine through? So get to the point where you start seeing the colors coming through. And then you can do it however much at that point you want or how little you want. Again, I wanted enough. I wanted it, once I started seeing the colors, I went a little further on sanding until the colors were a little bit more prominent, and then I stopped. But by the time I'm done, my hand can go over the entire project, and though there is texture on there because it's salt paint, it's still kind of smooth. And so you're getting most of that white off, and the part that's staying is smooth. So see how I'm getting into these little crevices? Okay, so just keep working hard on all this. I'm gonna fast forward through this, but I'm just showing you the more intricate spots. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to get into the frame in case you have something like this. You kind of bend your sandpaper like I did when we did that 90 degree angle, and just push it into the crevices to get that sanded down. And you do that along the entire part of the frame. So you'll do that on all the edges. Just kind of do that first before you do like the easier parts where it's just kind of just the flat pieces of wood, and that way you can kind of get into those crevices and get those to look more or less how you want them to look before you start doing the bigger pieces. I know this is kind of painful to watch how slowly I am sanding, but just know that you will sand so much faster than me because of my injury. And just think, I have been healing for a month before I even started working on this again, and this piece has taken me forever because of my injury. So just kind of watch how I'm getting into the crevices to help you in case you have that type of furniture that you have to do that as well. And then get into those little corners. Do your corners first. So see how I'm doing the inner edges of those corners. Get those done first, because then it's just, those are the harder parts. So kind of sand those down first, and then you'll be able to do the bigger piece of the flat wood, and then just kind of get it to match the part that you've already sanded. One thing I want to show here is that, see how I kind of went sideways sanding that? Every once in a while, do that somewhere, just randomly, because otherwise I am sanding in the direction of the wood. That's sideways, and that will just that sideways little sand that I just did is actually going to kind of break up the monotony of sanding in one direction. But for the most part, the entire piece of the wood, you kind of want to go in the direction of whatever the wood's going, like if it's up and down or sideways, follow that wood grain as you're sanding it the majority of the time. Now on the hardware, what you want to do with the hardware, and that's the hinges and then like these hardware pieces that I left on, you want to sand around the existing hardware that's on there. That means the hinges, that means this little handle. Sand around them first and get the wood beside it kind of what the look that you want. And then once you've sanded all the way around it, what you're doing is you're kind of touching that metal hardware as well. So you're already starting to sand it. So see how it's kind of breaking off some of the old white paint already? So you don't want to over sand the hardware because then it just doesn't look as good. You kind of want it to mix along with the furniture if you're leaving it on like I did. You can always take all the hardware off and actually just not even paint it, or paint it something else if you want. You're welcome to do that. I wanted to just make it all coincide with all the paint that I was doing. So I left the hardware on and I want it to kind of blend, but you don't have to do that. So see how I'm sanding all the way around that hardware, and as I'm doing that, it just slightly touches that metal, and it's kind of sanding it already. And then what I'm going to do is once I have finished sanding all the way around the hardware, and that means the hinges, this hardware I'm working on right now, once I've done that, then I can go back and I can kind of touch it gently where I want to touch it. So where does it need more of the paint, the white paint taken off, so that it can show some of the colors underneath. And then I touch the little knob handle that's on there. I just gently take that sandpaper and scrape off some of it because I want most of that white to stay on there. So that's the best way to do those. And same with the hinges. The hinges, you pretty much, when you sand around them, it hits the hinges pretty good. So you barely have to do any extra sanding on the actual hinges themselves. So kind of watch that with whatever hardware if you end up keeping it on like I did. Okay, see how we've kind of gone through here? So you're just kind of wanting to sand all the little parts. I've got most of them. The rest I'm just going to leave alone and finish because I've kind of shown you the trouble spots. So here we are. We've got everything sanded. I'm going to use the polyacrylic instead of the gator hide because I want it, the gator hide is dries too fast for me. And I'm up in my room and it's kind of I just don't want it to dry too fast. So I'm going to use the polyacrylic. Getting any of the extra, use an old toothbrush if you have little crevices like I do with a rag, and get any of the extra sanding powder out of there before we put the polyacrylic on. And then you want to gently, I'm just showing you because I've already done it, but you also want to just lightly spray it with some water, wipe it down really good before you do the polyacrylic. Now as you're doing the polyacrylic, I'm going to do 2 coats. When you do that, normally you sand between coats. On this particular piece, I like to use, usually between coats, I use a 1500 grit sandpaper, and I just gently sand it. Now this salt paint is a little more porous. There's more texture to it. So I ended up using 600 between coats. And then I'm just going, the only part that I sanded was the very top. So know that too, because the rest of it, I don't care. So the top part I did sand. I'm just using an old sock, and I'm taking all those knobs that I have and the upholstery tacks that I'm going to use in the end. I'm just dabbing on polyacrylic, and I'm putting 2 coats on those as well. And then I'm just going to set those aside. But no, too, I'm using an old sock. You can do it however you want. You can either use a paintbrush, whatever you want to use to apply it. I like to use an old sock because I like to get my finger into the crevices, and this has a lot of crevices. So it's just, I'm able to manage it better with the sock. So I'm just going to be putting the polyacrylic everywhere, and that really just protects it. Now the very top, I ended up, and I don't have it on the video, but I did sand the top only because I just wanted it to be smooth on top. And that I used 600, and I just went lengthwise and then widthwise. So I sanded it all lengthwise, and then I sanded it all widthwise. And it didn't have to be perfectly smooth, but it was a lot smoother. And then I did that, so basically I sanded it between the first coat and then the very last coat after it was dry. And you do have to let it dry every time, don't forget that. It has to dry every time. After the second coat, I only sanded the top, and I used 600 grit. Normally I use 1500, but I use 600 grit because this is more porous. And I went lengthwise, sanded it, and then I went widthwise and sanded it. And that's smooth enough for me. So, and then I applied the upholstery tacks, which you'll see at the very end, to the top of it. And you don't have to do that. I just wanted to give it a little bit of a different character and just add a little bit to it. But right now we're just wiping on the hardware, and I'm doing 2 coats of that so I can just set those aside, and then I can just get to work on the poly. And you can just kind of watch, just make sure that you're putting the poly, you know, everywhere. So coat it and make sure you do not have drips. Watch for drips because that's always the tricky part. So make sure that you're clearing any drips out, especially around the hardware and stuff where it might pool up. One thing too is when you're putting on the poly, it's the old white chalk paint. So this poly that I'm using is a clear matte, which is what I prefer because I don't like the real shiny stuff. And it gives, you'll see when you apply it, that it gives it a little bit of a deeper, richer color, I would say. So it's still clear, but it brings the colors out more. It makes them kind of pop more, and I like that. And besides that, I like to protect it. Now you could also use a wax over this because it is, you know, chalk paint. I wanted mine to last. I don't know about the wax long term. To me, that just doesn't seem like it's enough of a protection. It probably is, but I don't want to have to come back and do this again. So I'm using poly. That's what I prefer. That's my choice. And then I just do the 2 coats of that, and then I'll never have to worry about this piece again. So again, just cover it all with poly, and then between coats, sand it. If you want to sand the top. I didn't sand all the sides. If you want to sand the sides, you're going to have to do that too. But to me, it was only the top that I was concerned about because I'm going to be putting my TV on it and laying stuff on there, and I like to just have a smooth top. And one thing that's kind of cool too that I didn't do, but because I injured my hand, I was thinking too, if I wasn't upstairs, so this piece is made of real wood. It's extremely heavy. So my sons brought this up to my room, and I didn't have the heart to ask him to take it all the way back downstairs for me to do my little project and then bring it all the way back upstairs. So I've done this all in my room, which kind of sucks, but if I had that option, I think that I would have left the very top of it. I like it the way it looks, but I think I would have done a stain on the top, and that would kind of break up the project some. So have a really pretty stained top, and then have all the sides, the chalk paint, the salt paint, which I love the salt paint. I think this is so much fun. I had done a turntable, and I said when I did that turntable with salt paint that I wanted to, and I have a video if you want to look that up. When I did that turntable, which I love, that Lazy Susan turntable, I said I wanted to try one other project with salt paint. So that's why I went ahead and did this one. And I really like it. It's cool, and it really brought to life, I think, this piece. So just go ahead and start applying your stuff, and then we'll see what this looks like when we're done. Okay, we're at the home stretch. All we have left is the very top. So one thing I wanted to say about the top, because it's one solid piece, make sure that, see how I'm just kind of taking the poly, and I'm taking pretty good amounts of it. You want to keep it wet so that you don't have streaks. So watch as I'm doing it. I'm kind of filling it in as I go, and I'm being pretty quick about it. And then I kind of go back over what I've already polyed. See how I'm going back over that? I'm doing that because I'm keeping it wet, so that by the time I coat the entire piece on top, which is one complete piece of wood, I can go back and the whole thing's still wet so that there won't be any streaking. So I think that's important for any of you that haven't done this a lot. So see, I'm just keeping it wet. Just keeping it wet. And now I'm just going over the top, and you just kind of go back and forth, and that's what I'm going to do at the end. So just put enough poly on there to cover the entire top, keeping it wet as you're doing it, because this is one whole piece. Okay, I've got it pretty much done. I've got all the edges I just wiped down, and now I'm going to start going across, lift up, across, lift up, across, lift up, and doing that all the way. And that will help to alleviate. I got a little dry spot here, so add a little bit more while it's still wet. Cross, lift up, finish the pattern. And that helps. And then don't forget, I did sand in between coats, so that's already going to be done. And I only sanded the top, so you can do it how you want. If you need to sand the whole thing, that's fine too. Just watch for drips. Okay guys, this is our finished project. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. It's pretty cool. I mean, if you want to go to the beginning of the video, you can still see the intricacies of how close up the different colors are, the textures and all that. I've really enjoyed doing this piece. I like how it turned out. I love working with salt paint. It's just, I guess it's because it's different for me, and I painted for so many years that, you know, you just kind of do the same thing, same old. This is kind of fun to work with because the texture that's in there. And then I like this because it's more individual. You're never going to get the same piece twice, and you kind of get your own individual look. So it's the colors that you want to use, the amount of sanding, how deep you want to go, how much of the color you want it to shine through. All that's all together. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. And if you want to, send me some pics of your before and after projects of using this salt paint too. And I hope that you really enjoyed this. And just let me know in the comments below. I really like how it turned out. Thanks for watching.